How many of you know what you want to do with your life? Okay, same answer as before, hasn't changed. And as I said, I still doubt what I want to do with mine. But I've come to believe that doubt and uncertainty are good things. You need to embrace them and make them your friends. So today I'm going to take you through my filmmaking journey, and I'm going to talk about the lessons I've learned on the way. And I hope that you find them of some value. So when I was in college, I had some vague idea of what I wanted to do with my life. I had an early interest in theater and the arts and film. So I did a little bit of research, and I applied for a master's in filmmaking. And I believed, very naively at the time, that after I graduated, I would make a film. But the reality was very different. Films needed money for actors, for locations. You needed a distributor, equipment, and a crew, and I had none of that. The reality was I was pretty lost. So I assisted documentary filmmakers and did some theater work, and I floundered around in Delhi for a while. The truth is I was pretty lost. So I asked people for advice, and everyone told me to move to Bombay, because that's what you do if you want to be a filmmaker in India. So there I was. I was in the right city. I had the right degree. It had to work out now, right? So I wrote lots of emails, and I made a bunch of phone calls, and I met lots of people, and I waited for months for the phone to ring. And finally, I found some work in commercials and films. Now, living in Bombay made me realize something, that I wasn't very inspired by mainstream Bollywood cinema. It just didn't do it for me. They didn't seem to be telling stories about people and places and things that mattered. They didn't seem to stand for anything. And for me, work had to count. It had to mean something. Now, the thing is, this is a conundrum. Because if you live and work in Bombay, and you're not inspired by mainstream cinema, what do you do? At the time, I couldn't see any other way forward, or any other way to be an independent filmmaker. Now, this is hard for you professionally and personally, because you're torn about what to do. On one hand, you want to stay on in Bombay and hope for better work, but on the other hand, you want to make a change. And every few months, I would question my career choices. And I would look at friends of mine with regular 9-to-5 jobs and a regular paycheck, and I would wonder what on earth I was doing with my life. Now, being a freelance filmmaker can be pretty soul-crushing at the best of times. You have no regular job, no office to go to, no identity, and no sort of structured path to follow. Now, I lived with this dilemma for a while, but I waited for the work to get better. And when it didn't, I was faced with the frightening prospect of moving right back to Delhi. Now, at the time, this felt like a massive failure. I was hard on myself. And the truth is, this was a pretty devastating moment. So there I was, back in Delhi, and it was back to the drawing board. I knew that I wasn't very inspired by films we were making in India. And I thought perhaps there's a world of opportunity outside. And I knew that India was a destination for international film crews looking to shoot. So once again, I made lots of calls and wrote emails and knocked on doors. And with a bit of luck and perseverance, I was hired as a set production assistant on a British film being shot in India. Now, being a production assistant is very low down in the film food chain. But the work was good. The crew was inspiring. And I liked what I was doing. So slowly, I worked my way up the film food chain to become a first assistant director. I felt like I'd hit my stride. Now, that's a pretty big deal early on in your career, because I had a chance to work with some of the world's most amazing filmmakers very closely. It was quite rewarding. On the back of that, in 2007, I won the prestigious INLAC scholarship, and this supported me financially to work and live in London and New York and work on film there. Now, working in these two cities was amazing. I learned a lot, and it trained my mind and my head into new ways of thinking. In 2008, I worked on Danny Boyle's Slumdog Millionaire. And as you know, the film just exploded. I was name-checked in an Oscar acceptance speech, and it was a very rewarding moment. And I remember clearly thinking to myself that it has to work out from now on, right? So there I was. I had worked on the biggest film of 2008. I had a scholarship under my belt and feature films to my credit. So I sorted myself out with a work permit, and I made a big move to London. World cinema, I thought, here I come. But the reality of working in London was very different. It was hard to find work. The financial crisis had hit, and recession set in. Now, London was much more expensive to work in than Bombay or Delhi. And very soon, I ran out of my savings. And once again, I was faced with the prospect of moving back to Delhi. Now, this was even harder than the move back from Bombay a few years ago, because I had left India with such hopes. But something interesting happened at this time. I believe that I had learned some lessons from my move back from Bombay. I had toughened up, and I was able to get my act together and plug myself right back into the foreign film circuit that I had left. Now, post the success of Slumdog, a lot of big international crews were looking to shoot in India, and I was there to work on them. The scope and scale of the work I was doing grew. I liked what I was doing, and I was being paid extremely well to do it. But somewhere inside, I felt like the work I was doing was a compromise. I was working on other people's films. I was helping them realize their creative vision, not my own. And I lived in denial about this for a long time. But I believe that there comes a moment in your life when you have a moment of calling, when you feel restless, and you want to do something else with your life, something that is your own. But you're not quite sure what it is, and you're not quite sure how to get there. So, you self-sabotage your calling, and fear sets in deep. Now, I think most people get stuck in this phase of denial and never find their true calling. It's because fear is such a powerful emotion that you cannot fight it. But I've learned that you mustn't fight it. You must play with it and accept it. Fear is not your enemy. Paralysis is. You must have faith that if you jump, a net will appear. So in 2011, I met a fellow filmmaker, Aisha Sood, and she shared a remarkably similar film journey to my own. We both shared the same disillusionment with Bollywood, but more importantly, we shared a hope and a vision for the future of filmmaking and storytelling in India. So, we took a small leap of faith and we started our own production company called Jamun. Now, the past 5 years of running and working at Jamun have felt like coming home. I was able to look back at my journey and connect the dots and apply what I had learned in a very real way to our little startup. So today, I'm going to take you through 5 insights from my years at Jamun, and I hope they make your leap of faith a little less intimidating. The first thing I want to talk about is to question everything. And I can't stress this enough, especially in this current political climate. Now, the thing is, everyone's journey is different. But you must question conventional paths and ways of going about them. You must find your own way forward. Now, I live and work in India, and I haven't worked on a single Bollywood film. But I have the privilege of working on some of the biggest international films of the past 10 years. Now, none of this would have happened if I didn't question my career choices early on. And I believe I wouldn't have founded Jamun if I didn't ask myself some hard questions. Now, this philosophy and this ethos of questioning things is something we're very proud of at Jamun. Now, conventional wisdom tells you to ask 2 questions when you're asked to make a film. What's your budget, and what's your timeline? At Jamun, we try and dig a little deeper. So if we're asked to make an advertising film, for example, we will always ask, what are we trying to sell? Who are we trying to sell it to? Why are we trying to sell it to these people? What is the behavior we're trying to change? Why does that behavior exist in the first place? And I think that asking these questions will often scare our clients away. But digging deep and unraveling helps us become better filmmakers. The next thing I want to talk about is collaboration. Now, filmmaking is perhaps the most collaborative of the arts. You cannot do it alone. And to explain this, I'm going to give you a small example of a scene I was shooting back in 2012 on a small independent film. So the scene is of a 5, 6-year-old boy who's supposed to be having a party and fun in a bathtub. And take after take, it looks staged and it doesn't look real. And it's a first-time director, and she's worried about how to make the scene work. So I asked the heads of department to step in. So makeup walks in and makes a mohawk with the boy's hair. The art department walks in and makes soap bubbles everywhere and splashes water all around. The prop master walks in and takes a rubber ducky, breaks its head off, and throws it around everywhere. The camera department takes the cue, takes a little sheet of glass, sprays some water on it, sticks it to the lens, and suddenly the film works. Now, any creative endeavor, a production company or a film, is a massive collaborative effort. So, find people who complement your strengths and weaknesses and partner up. This is my favorite, embrace chaos. Now, I believe that the reason I keep getting hired as a first assistant director is because I've learned to visualize what to do when things go wrong, and they often do. Now, there's something they say about filmmakers in India, is that we plan like a military machine, but we perform like a circus. And it's kind of true, because things often don't go as planned. Actors will be late, stars will have tantrums, generators will run out of fuel, makeup won't look right, wardrobe won't fit, it'll rain when there's supposed to be sun, and it'll be cloudy on a day that you needed bright sunshine. But somewhere within this chaos, I believe you can make beautiful films in India, if you embrace it. Now, in your journey, things will perhaps not always go to plan. Learn that that's a part of it, embrace it, and you'll be better served for it. The next thing I want to talk about is something that I like to term as one for the real and one for the rent. Now, I'll try and explain how that works at Jamun. So, we try and balance out our work between work that pays for the rent and our salaries and work that builds up our showreel and feeds our creative soul. So, if we're asked to do a film for, say, a fashion brand and it's high budget, we'll say yes, because it pays the bills. But we'll try and balance that out with, say, a low-budget film on women and land rights or gender, because that helps build our showreel. Now, in your endeavors or your production companies or startups, whatever you want to call it, you won't always be in a privileged position to choose your clients or your work. But the way to address it is to make sure you do one for the real and one for the rent. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is something that I call finding your voice. Now, early on in your careers, external influences will be strong, and it's okay to reference other people's work and to be inspired by it. But often creating something new in this country, especially in the films we make and even in the recent startup scene, takes the form of simple copying. But you will never create anything of any value unless you bring your own voice to it. Now, what I mean by bringing your own voice is an endeavor to find something unique and something that is your own. And this comes with exploring the world around you, talking to people, and life experience. So to conclude, I will say, find what moves you, forge your own path, and take that leap of faith. Thank you.